Honest community, before we dive into this episode, we've got a quick free favour to ask. If you enjoy the Honest Property podcast, please hit like, follow and subscribe wherever you're listening from. It helps us grow, reach more people and bring on guests that you want to hear from. Thanks for being a part of this. We appreciate you more than you know.
And welcome to the Honest Property podcast with your hosts, Becky and Ruth. And we like to talk about all things, holistic business, entrepreneurship and property investing and all types of investing really. But that's the main thing that we promote is property investing. So today we have on the podcast is special guest, Emily Wilson. So we love Emily. Go way back because Emily, we used to have a pet care business and Emily, I begged her to join the team.
Getting a phone call like, I trust no one else, please.
I was like, I'm going to win her over with this chihuahua. So I put the chihuahua I was looking after at the time on her lap and was like, please join us. Because there is no one better. I couldn't think of anyone better to join the team because Emily is a devout animal and wildlife enthusiast and a professional at that. And Emily actually is this all came a bit full circle actually because Emily, alongside pet care, which she still does, is a ecologist with a master's in ecology. And she helps developers basically. How do you explain it? You probably have better words for what it is.
So basically what we do is we tell developers what you need to do, what mitigation you need to put in place in order to comply with the laws and stuff, and any species licenses they might need in order to complete that mitigation. So we basically do that.
Yeah. So if you're planning on developing, or if you are planning on just building any sort of property, Emily is going to be the person that you encounter part of the planning process, and she'll be the person who inform you what biodiversity are on site that we need to be considerate of. And Ruth and I really want to promote being ethical, like having high values when it comes to sustainability and having a low impact business, even in the property world.
Yeah.
So
I think that gets neglected or doesn't get talked about enough, and we really want to bring that into the forefront of conversation, that we are part of the ecosystem, we are part of the world. And so if you are going to build, be mindful about the wildlife as well. Not just about the people, it's about everyone that's living on this earth.
And Emily's the pro and she'll be the person.
Because I remember actually, Emily, you telling us about a story of there was a bat colony and somewhere and they weren't able to build. Was that right? I can't remember if it.
Yeah, so this sort of thing happens a lot when you have bat roosts in the area. So it could be trees, existing buildings, like sometimes caves. In Bath, you have caves with horseshoe and lesser horseshoe bats, which is very cool. And if you want to develop on this land or near those areas with bat roosts, then you'll need to put compensation measures and mitigation measures in place in order to complete the development. So, for example, say you're destroying 15 roosts. In order to compensate for that, you might have to build like a bat house. So a structure dedicated for bat roosts, or, putting up bat boxes. So generally in ecology, if you destroy or take something away, you need to give the exact same back and more.
Which makes sense. Yeah.
I like that it's and more.
Yeah. So there's actually something called biodiversity net gain, which is used widely throughout consultancy, where any habitat that you destroy or take away, you have to give back ideally 20% extra habitat creation or improvement.
I love that. It's funny. I didn't realize it was 20% more. That's a good amount more.
That's what lots of people strive for. It could be sort of 10 to 20, but generally these days people are pushing for 20% extra.
So how do you even measure that?
So it's using a biodiversity net gain metric. So basically when we go out and we do our phase 1 habitat surveys, we record all of the habitats present, and they're all categorized in the UK HAB categories, which you can find online. And then we ask our GIS guys to measure the area of all of these habitats. And then basically we put all of these into a BNG calculator, which you can download off of the BNG government website, then you can calculate, because some will be low value, some will be high value environments and stuff like that. And then you basically just sort of play around with it until you get the what you want, basically, get the extra percentage that you want.
So so for the process of a developer, if they're like, okay, here's a plot of land, I could potentially make some homes on this. What would the process look like? Would they call you guys out first for a survey just to make sure that they can even do it? Or if there would be any species that they definitely couldn't?
So there's always workarounds. There's always workarounds in terms of like, there's no species where you just have to completely move your development. You know, that's, I guess, a personal choice. Say there was a small developer and they were particularly mindful of the wildlife. And if they, I don't know, found like some natterjack toads or something like that, which are quite rare and stuff like that. If they personally wanted to move it or didn't want to build that, that's their decision. But there's always mitigation measures we can put in place so the development can go ahead. So basically what would happen is the first survey we would do would be a phase 1 survey where we go on and we assess the land, habitats, and basically say what species could live in that habitat. And then we'll recommend species surveys. And then if we find the species on those surveys, then we'll recommend mitigation or any licenses that need to be applied for.
So
it's all a lengthy process. A lot of developers, it's annoying thing we have to do to comply with the law. And I know some developers can get quite frustrated with all the things that you have to do. However, I think when it comes to working with developers and developers working with ecologists, one of the best things you can do is just to have like really good lines of communication and share your construction program with the ecologist, because the ecology program will feed into the construction program. So for example, if you want to fell trees in spring, we would have to say you can't do that because it's the bat breeding season and you can't fell trees in spring, for example. And also, you know, we have to do a certain amount of surveys to inform the species license. And so we would have to say it's going to take this amount of time to complete these surveys. So we won't be able to apply for the license and have it accepted before this time. So you won't be able to break ground until this point. So it's all sort of very much working together to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that we get all the ecology done so all the animals are happy and hopefully all the people are happy.
Yeah, because imagine a world where we just didn't consider all this. Like, what would we be living
very
in?
Boring, I think. Very grey, lots of concrete.
Yeah. Well, Ruth and I did an episode a little while ago now, wasn't it? And it was about how you can just try and be as eco-friendly as possible with your business, but like with property, if there's no green spaces, you're not going to have happy people, you're not going to have happy tenants, and you're not going to have a very just happy business.
Well, in terms of like well-being and stuff, getting out and seeing green is one of the like best things you can do to help with, you know, anxiety and depression. It's you know, I think there's been studies that have been done on it and everything. So getting outside and touching some grass, very beneficial. And also having that around you, I think, you know, I know lots of people like their sort of manicured gardens, everything in straight lines and stuff like that. But really, a messy garden is the best thing you can do for your wildlife. The messier, the better. Even if it doesn't look, you know, excellent, that's what the wildlife will need. So for example, like not mowing your lawn, or perhaps like, you know, planting like wildflower meadow seeds in your lawn and stuff like that. So you create a lovely meadow instead of a sort of manicured lawn. But, you know, basically a variation in plants and plant species in your garden, it's the best thing to attract a wide variety of invertebrates. And then, you know, you got up the chain. So then like birds and animals that feed on those invertebrates and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And also having like a pond in your garden is really great as well, because you attract all the amphibians. And, you know, they're really important in the summer as well. But we're getting such hot summers at the moment that we sort of forget that like badgers are mammals, foxes, mice, they all need to drink. And lots of animals are suffering of dehydration, especially hedgehogs. They often come into rescues dehydrated, and so a pond is also really great.
We did bring this up with another lady on our podcast about, I want to know your opinion. Like, how do you tackle this with developers? Are you quite involved in the design process as well, part of the planning? Because what if a developer wants to put fake grass and that's all they want to be able to put down because it's efficient, it's manicured, but it's not in line with making sure that it's, doesn't look after the environment at all, that erodes over time. So is that something that you get to look at as an ecologist?
So this would also come into the B&G. Creating, gardens and stuff like that can add to your biodiversity net gain. And so it's kind of the interest of developers to have those gardens because it can fit in really well to the development as opposed to having to compensate for the biodiversity net gain in other areas of your development. So it's like sort of little pockets instead of, having to find somewhere else to create the habitat. So it's definitely I think it's within the interest of everybody to have, nice wildlife gardens, in my opinion.
But what would you
people living there, it adds to your biodiversity net gain, not by much, but a little bit, So
a little bit.
What is up?
What would you advise for landlords on how to improve their biodiversity with the properties that already have now? Not developers are already there. It's in the beginning process. But what if you are already a landlord, or you're wanting to purchase a property that maybe doesn't have that kind of biodiversity already because it's already existed for a long time? What can you do to improve that biodiversity now?
So if the property has a garden, and if it's covered in like hard standing or artificial grass, well, first of all, rip up the artificial grass and like plant some like wildflower seeds, or make it a sort of proper garden again. Create a pond. There's so many different things you can do with not much space. So for example, the World Wetlands Trust website has a tutorial on how to make a drain pipe wetland. So basically you use the runoff rainwater from your drain pipe, and you create get some bricks and a container and stuff like that, and basically you make your own little wetland. So you don't need much space in order to do a lot of these things. You can plant plants that attract bees and bats in like just flower pots, and it all helps attract wildlife to your garden. I mean, in the summer I have just a little dish, a shallow dish with a couple of pebbles in it, sort of like rocks, and I fill it with water and make sure it's topped up with water so animals have something to drink in the summer. And having the rocks is really important so animals can get out if they fall in to the dish. What I have is a plate, and I have to fill it up basically every day because in the summer it just evaporates. But yeah, then like insects can have a drink, mice, and all the way up to like badgers and foxes and stuff like that. So
I love that there's little steps. I've been dying to get a pond in our garden actually, but I feel like you do need to have like filtering systems and stuff like that. So I got
no.
By the maintenance.
No, there's so many tutorials on how to build gardens and stuff. Build ponds, gardens too, but ponds on like which website is it on? So there's a website called discoverwildlife.com, which is part of BBC Wildlife. And there's loads of blog posts, loads of tutorials. There's a magazine as well. So there's so much information on there. Having a little look through there is really useful. And there's also tips on how to attract birds into your garden on the RSPB website, and also the World Wetlands Trust as well for creating ponds and stuff like that. But generally, you don't need a filtration system. You just need to dig a hole, get a lining, depending on the soil type you've got. And there's loads of different linings and stuff like that. And then basically just kit it out with aquatic plants, stones and stuff like that, and you're good to go.
What about, so I play devil's advocate. Is that the saying? Devil's advocate? I don't know. Well, I was going to say, like, okay, I'm someone, I don't have time. I work full, like 12 hours. All I want to do is go to sleep. I want something that's easy. I maybe don't, have enough. I just don't have enough time or money to be able to create these spaces for wildlife. I'm in just looking after myself. How can I make it so easy to be able to contribute back to the environment without it taking, how can you make it so easy for someone who is so short of time, money, and maybe works on long hours.
Made it very,
Yeah.
making
But I feel like, if there's a way to make sure that everyone actually prioritizes this, like it's not just about ourselves, it's also we are part of this ecosystem. So how do we make
it
sure
foolproof?
how do we make it so like there's
Just
so
easy. Do absolutely nothing. Let your garden just go wild. Let the weeds go wild. Nettles are great. Nettles are great, not just for people. Like, you can make so many things with nettles. I literally go out to the woods in the summer and collect nettles to make like soups and teas and, you know, like all sort of stuff. Just let your garden go wild. You don't have to do anything. You know, no mowing. Like it's the easiest form of gardening.
it's that simple, really. So
Do less.
they do less.
Hey guys, if you're new to property investing, we know exactly how hard it is to figure out where to start. That's why we created the Beginner's Roadmap. It's your guide to mastering the fundamentals so that you can move forward with clarity and confidence. Plus, you'll gain access to our free community for ongoing support. Just hit the link in the show notes. Now, let's jump back into this episode.
And if you want to like sow some like wildflower seeds, a lot of the time it's just a matter of scattering them,
Yeah.
giving them that initial water and just letting like.
What about from
do the
an
rest.
investor perspective, like Japanese knotweed? That grows
Yes.
What would you say about that? Because like that's not something that you can just let grow, especially if it damages property. So there's like a fine line of letting things grow and be wild and free, but at the same time it could ruin your investment. So how do you have
the
any
difference with Japanese knotweed is that it's an invasive non-native species. And so it's not meant to be here. And that's the reason as to why it's, you know, part of the reason why it's removed. And obviously that requires a specialist to remove it, as it's pretty tricky and difficult, so don't try it by yourself. But yeah, so it's an invasive species, and that's why we want to remove it and to get it out of our ecosystem, basically. So it's different to all the plants that we want to like sow and stuff like that, are all like native, all found in the UK widely and stuff like that. So yeah, and as I said, invasive species can be quite dominating in gardens or, you know, areas where they grow. So
what would you love to see, Emily, happen with developments? What would you like to personally see happen that helps to allow us in the UK to be able to continue building these homes that are needed, but at the same time build in a way that also allows animals to live together? Because I'm trying to think. The example I'm trying to give is Becky has a friend, sorry, who
who
who are we talking about? Becky has a friend who very much in the design of development made sure that it allowed for birds to be able to live within the roofing. And like things like that, but
yeah, so all that sort of stuff would be great. Like you can get Swift bricks, which are basically bricks with swift nests like built in, and so you can incorporate those. Obviously, put bat boxes on your house if you're like really sort of, you know, an avid wildlife enthusiast and you want to find out what's in your area. If you're developing, like not a massive development, but say you're building a home for yourself, you could look on NBN Atlas, and this is a free service to look up species records in your area. And so you can look up what species are in your area, then you could sort of tailor your garden or, you know, stuff like that to the species listed there. So for example, if you've got a lot of swifts in your area, you can put swift bricks in, or if you've got crevice dwelling bats, but not void dwelling bats, you can put up back boxes suitable for crevice dwelling bats and stuff like that. I would love to see developers, like, no one's ever going to do this, but like increasing connectivity between gardens. So having little bits of fence cut out for like hedgehogs and for mammals and stuff like that to pass through, because that's the thing. One thing about gardens that isn't so excellent is that a lot of the time it causes habitat fragmentation, because, you know, some animals, if you've got big high fences, can't travel between the gardens and between the different like habitats and stuff like that. So I would love to see that. Definitely more sort of integration with like swift bricks and stuff like that, more ponds. But I also think, I think developers do this anyway, but being mindful of the materials you use to build the homes, to optimize, you know, insulation and stuff like that, so reducing your carbon footprint there as well, and using sort of sustainable materials.
So yeah, I think that's what I would like to see. But it's all these things, like, for example, some of these more eco-friendly alternatives for building might be more expensive, and so therefore, isn't the first choice.
Yeah, because in reality, a lot of the developers that we know don't actually their profit margin after completing everything, and it is quite an undertaking. It's not very. It's a surprise there is not very little actually left over.
They say if you're in the developing world, you're very cash poor. You're basically broke.
Asset rich, cash poor.
Yeah. So I feel like I understand why. Well, they're not even asset rich unless they hold on to them. I think once they have to, and they get a little shaving off the top. I can understand why they want the shortcuts or like the cheaper material.
There is a lot of loopholes in the UK already to be like that doesn't. It makes it harder. Sorry, not loop, but red tape to be able to be as environmentally conscious with the materials that you need and stick within budget to be able to build, which is really frustrating. We hear a lot from people in the property space.
Yeah, I can imagine. These days, it's always just such a struggle, isn't it? Everything's so expensive. My weekly food shop's gone from like 25 quid a few years ago to like 50. Life is just more expensive in general, I feel.
Yeah, it is so much more expensive, but it's the downside of that is that somewhere, because of that, something else takes the prices paid somewhere else, which unfortunately ends up being the environment.
Are there any sort of schemes, I suppose, or grants or anything that that exist to support developers with making more?
I don't know about grants for developers in that sort of sense of it, unfortunately. But because from what I do and stuff like that, it's more of consultancy. So people bring us in and pay us money to do the surveys and to tell them how much more money they'll need to spend with us. Put all the mitigation in place and write all the reports and stuff. So I'm not aware personally, but it would be good if there was optimistic that there is something like that out there.
Yeah, hopefully there is.
I was going to say as well, like we went to a property showroom, and it's quite a selling point to be able to have.
When we walk in, I don't know if it's just us, but I feel like our generation are a lot more, or I'd like to think,
want to be more eco-conscious.
We want to be more eco-friendly.
Yeah, we see the world and we go,
sustainability is like a buzzword.
Yeah.
So
we went to a beautiful garden and a show home, and it had like an
it was like RSPB approved,
and it was beautiful. It was beautiful, but it looks, quite wild, but
it did look meadowy.
Meadowy, and it looked really lovely. And I was like, what a selling point for someone that's like, we would want to buy that because that's a huge.
Buy that.
Yeah,
and it had bat boxes as well. I was like, oh, good.
Yeah, exactly. That's great.
Yeah, but do you think there will be more of that happening in the next 5-10 years? Because I've not really much.
I would hope so. As you said, I feel like sort of people, millennials and Zoomers, are definitely sort of more eco-conscious than perhaps some of the older generations. I think mostly just because it's come to the forefront of society that we need to do something. Otherwise, there's not going to be an environment for us to live in. So it's kind of down to us to do something about it as that sort of generation that's, taking that on.
I think as well, like this is why we wanted to bring this conversation forward, because there is a lot of millennials, Gen Zs, who may not even be able to get on the property ladder themselves. So if they're not but if they're not able to do do up their garden because the landlord says no, we just want to highlight this. It's bridging that gap of saying, okay, what can landlords do right now then? If there are millennials and Gen Zs and the next generations who are not able to afford to buy a property to be able to live in themselves, the rental market do right now to be able to allow tenants living and making it a home? What can they do to give a bit of leniency so that they can also create and be responsible of creating that space for the hedgehogs, the bats, the birds, and not get penalised with their tenancy agreement?
So I think a lot of these things that landlords can put in place and the tenants don't have to even worry about it. So for example, bat and bird boxes you can put up and you can leave for 10 years. And so the tenants won't even have to touch them. I mean, I don't know much about landlords and stuff like that and how sort of the restrictions per se, but I think creating like a garden where you can just sort of let it run wild for tenants that perhaps, don't want to, keep the garden. You don't have time to keep the garden up, maybe because, people have like 2 or 3 jobs these days. But yeah, I would just say that, like, if people have an avid interest in wildlife, then put some bird feeders up, and then you can see the birds in your garden and all these things which are...
Before we continue, here's a quick thought. Ever feel like there's just never enough time to focus on what really matters in your business? You don't have to do it all alone. As they say, a great team makes everything easier. That's why we've partnered with the Freedom Geek. Their talented Filipino VAs help us with tasks like admin and podcast editing, just like for this episode, giving us the freedom to focus on what really moves the needle. If you're looking to reclaim your time and to work smarter, then check out the Freedom Geek. All the details are in the show notes. Now let's get back to our conversation.
You don't have to install them permanently. So like, a bird bath or, just like plant pots with plants in. I'm sure all these are all things that landlords wouldn't mind tenants installing and stuff like that. You can grow so many things in pots. Like during COVID, I went on a massive hyperfixation of growing loofahs. I decided that I was going to create my own loofah sponges, and my garden at the back gets like no sun, but the front gets loads, but there's no like soil in the front for me to plant loofahs. So what I did was I got like 4 or 5 massive like tubs, filled them with like earth and manure and stuff like that, and grew loofah plants from there. And I made like this trellis up the side of the house, and it worked really well. But that I didn't need to, like, I took away everything I used at the end of the growing season. And so you can do lots of stuff like that. If you want to grow vegetables, you can get grow bags from gardening shops and stuff like that. So there's so many options you can do. It's just a matter of like having a quick research and seeing what it is you want to do. Basically, it's very personalized. You can get little bug hotels and stuff like that, which again you can just pop up or put on a stone and leave, and that's kind of it. So there's so many things you can do.
That's really helpful. So for landlords, you're saying the easiest thing that you can do is put up the bird boxes, anything.
Bug hotel. They're listing. Personally, I would be like, sold. This is a nice list.
But if you're living in a shared accommodation, so you're living in a what's called a HO, then you might be living with other people that you don't want to share that responsibility. So having the
almost like a set and forget kind of thing there that sort of serves its purpose without needing that much tending to.
Yeah, so those sort of like bat boxes, bird boxes, perfect for that. Also, just
what about
cats? I mean, cats are the number one predator of birds and bats in the UK at the moment. The current sort of guidance is if you can try and keep your cat indoors at dawn and dusk, because that's when bats are most active. Birds is a bit more tricky because they're out during the day. But it's one of those things, there's not a massive amount you can do short of keeping your cat inside all the time, which isn't always excellent for that cat, bless it. But yeah, I would say trying to keep your cat in at dawn and dusk. Yeah, because cats, what they will do is they'll find a bat roost and they'll sit outside the roost and just swat the bats as they come out. So yeah, it is sneaky.
What about wearing like a bell or something? Is that inhumane to the cat, or there's a way for the birds or the bats to have a warning, or is that what's your thoughts?
Really been found to work. I think maybe perhaps it could, but generally, I mean, if you think about in the city, all the noises that go on and stuff like that, and birds and stuff aren't fazed by it. Sort of a quiet jingle isn't always going to make much difference. I know lots of owners that do, but I think the research around whether it makes a difference is a bit grey. But I think some owners prioritize the fact that, if the collar of the cat gets snagged, it's obviously a strangulation risk. It depends how active your cat is. If your cat is just like pootling around their neighborhood and just like lying in the sun and, going to other people's gardens hoping for food, like sticks to the Sid, a collar is probably great. But if you've got a very sort of active cat, where it's possible for them to get like caught on a tree and stuff like that, perhaps not. But is that the discretion of the owners, I guess?
it's a difficult conversation
It's very difficult.
because in the UK we love our pets and we love our cats, and sometimes it's uncomfortable to have like talk some truths that actually, they're not. I mean, it's a whole debate whether or not we should have pets or not, but like some people think yes, some people think no, but it does, at the end of the day, just more people, more pets do create more damage to the environment, and we cannot pretend like we don't. So what are your top tips, or as just a decent human being, not even just as a investor, landlord, developer? What are your own top tips as just a human on what you can do?
This
The
is
dog's just been
Luna. She's scratching at the door and she's managed to get in.
She was like, I hear you talking about pets. What are you saying?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I heard it come in, that little nose is being like by my legs. Terrible. They're all in here now. Ponyo nibbling my feet. Goodness me, absolute nightmare. Sorry, I got distracted by that. What was the question?
You were just saying, like, what's your top tips to be a good human?
Yeah,
Regardless of our profession or whether it's you're a developer, like, what is the easiest thing to implement that helps biodiversity and the environment?
I think being conscious of your choices. So, for example, I mean, a lot of this stuff takes extra time. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't. Like, being avid with your recycling, saving your soft plastics and, recycling them at your local supermarket. There are now places where you can recycle like your pill packets,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Composting, like if you have a home compost, it's really great because I know that, with dogs, you use a lot of dog poo bags, and compostable dog poo bags aren't actually compostable because they don't get sent to a facility, because there isn't a facility that exists in order to compost them. So it just goes to landfill and they don't actually really break down. However, if you have a home compost and you can compost your own dog poo bags or dog poo there, then that's great. But I appreciate lots of people probably wouldn't want to do that. But that's another way to reduce it. And also, not using single-use plastic. I mean, there's a bazillion places in Bristol that are zero waste shops where you can stock up on rice, pasta, soaps, body wash, etc. All of those things where you're not using single-use plastic. I think is really beneficial. Also, like cutting down your meat consumption to maybe like 1 or 2 days a week, as there is a big contributor of like carbon emissions, especially methane for cows and stuff. And so I think all of these choices, it's not necessarily eliminating anything, but it's reducing, because I think a lot of the time people get scared of, oh, I have to stop doing this or I have to stop doing that. And then they get sort of scared and then, do nothing.
I like what you're saying, because it's like,
you're not saying
it's not all or nothing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I read a study years ago in my undergrad, and people were more likely to do nothing when faced with all of these problems than do something. Do you know what I mean? But if you sort of say it's not an all or nothing situation, doing a little bit of something is better than nothing, then, because I think people are like, oh, I don't want to give this up, or I don't want to give that up. And you don't have to. You just have to reduce, how many times you eat meat, or, how many like Dr. Pepper bottles you have, or you drink, how much Dr. Pepper you drink, or something like that. All of these things, it all helps the environment. Like, how many days you go to like drive to work, maybe like cycle a couple of days a week, or use public transport. Although I always opt to cycle because I hate the public transport with a passion. It's never on time.
I love those tips.
it's basically, you're just saying it comes down to the consumption, and we live in a world where we overconsume that to the detriment of the environment and our health.
And I know lots of people are saying, well, lots of other people are buying these things, so what I do isn't going to make a difference. And to that I say to you, look at Elon Musk and Tesla right now and tell me that consumer decisions don't make a difference.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. I
So
think
if enough people do, it does help. And it helps reduce your carbon footprint, like personally.
And having these conversations and normalizing it, and just having the suggestions and insights like what you're sharing makes people just consider the other. Some things Ruth and I have done. I mean, if you need, so you bought a property to rent, and you were doing it up and you needed, go to the what's it called? The recycling centre. There's
Yeah.
always paint. No one ever finishes the paint. And white's white if you're going to get brilliant white.
Exactly. White is white at the
Yeah. Or if you need to furnish, double check Facebook Marketplace or
I got all my furniture off Facebook Marketplace. It's absolutely excellent. It's so good. And you find so much, like, I think the things you find there have so much more character. Most are bought from, like, you know, IKEA and stuff. A lot of the time it's like vintage and really well made and hard wood and stuff like that. And if you don't like the color of the wood, then you can paint it and make it your own and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But I love a bit of maximalist interior design. So I'd be like painting flowers on it and pink and yellow.
That actually saves you money.
Exactly.
It doesn't cost you so much just to make a more conscious decision.
Yeah, and also like being aware of fast fashion as well, which is, you know, is a big thing. How used to be, it's a big thing at the moment with how much goes to landfill, which is an immense amount. It's an immense amount goes to landfill. So mending your clothes, darning your socks, you know, Vinted, I use all the time. I think it's amazing. I buy way too much on Vinted. Stuff like that can make a real difference. I can't remember the last time I bought like a brand new piece of clothing.
Actually, no, we also like to say, like, we're so don't want to own a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so like we personally do a lot of clothes swaps as well, you know.
That's
just
really
trying
good
to
fun.
Yeah, because like and then you end up coming back round the things that you gave away, but they've come back just a few years later. But
I've had stuff from you guys before. Like, do you want this? I'm getting rid of it. Yes, please.
Yeah, but I think it's just, we just want to share more about, like, okay, yes, we are Lawrence Property Sisters, but we want, like, everything is connected, everything matters.
Absolutely. And it's just trying to do a little bit in all of those aspects, I think, which is important. So, you know, like, you know, mending your jeans, putting some wildflower seeds in the garden, putting up a bird or a bat box. It's just little things make a big difference if everybody does them.
and then it compounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my top tips.
But they're really easy takeaways. Do less, basically.
Spend more time in bed in the mornings.
And
Look outside and watch the birds while you eat your breakfast.
Yeah, and if you're a property investor or a developer, consider the impacts of what your development will do first and work with your ecologist so that you actually make a home that is actually doing some good.
But it's like, yes, you will, of course, like, you want to make money, but at the same time, do you want to leave a legacy for the rest of the world? Not just like for your children, but what about the animals,
and the world they're going
to live in? It's your responsibility. If you're building something or you're providing homes for other people, really consider about the impact that you are
making the world you want people to live in,
because it's a butterfly effect.
And just remember, we're on the same side. A lot of the time it feels like ecologists are fighting, you know, against developers, but we're on the same side. We want you to succeed in your development, but also we have to adhere to the laws surrounding wildlife as well. And, you know, we have to advocate for their well-being too.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. So Emily, to wrap up this podcast, we have a question to ask you that we asked our guests at the end of every podcast episode, which is, it could be anything to do with life or with your work, ecology. So the question is, honestly, the biggest lesson I've learned is...
Honestly, the biggest lesson I've learned is to follow your interests with wildlife, I think. Yeah, I think to follow your interests, that's what I've done my whole life, and it served me really well. I've sort of loved wildlife ever since I was young, and, you know, I just followed it and it sort of led me here. And I, you know, think it's a really fun thing to do with families, to get out and explore wildlife and see what you can do in your home. And I don't think I know many people that don't have an interest in wildlife. And if you're a developer and you have property and stuff like that, then I'm sure that you also have an interest in making homes, not just for people, but for wildlife.
Yeah, that's kind of beautiful. It's just not just a home for people, but also for wildlife. I love that. That's a great way to end this episode. Oh, thank you so much, Emily.
Thanks,
I'm sure
Emily.
we will
Thanks
see
for
you at the
having
next.
me. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see you at the next dog gathering.
If you want anyone to find you, where can they find you?
Just my Instagram probably is a good place to start.
We'll add that in the show notes below so that you can
Perfect.
follow and see what you get to do. But thank you so much, Emily, for being on the podcast. We'll see you soon.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Bye.